Guys, what is going on? It is Nate the Game Guy coming back with another video, and I've got something that I need to share with you guys, especially if you're a Super Nintendo owner and a collector. Now, recently I've been collecting more Super Nintendo games, so of course that means I'm dusting off the Super Nintendo and I'm trying out some games to have some fun with. Now, unfortunately, I've been noticing some problems with my Super Nintendo, and I thought it was just one game at first, but after trying a couple of other games, I'm noticing that there's something going on with my Super Nintendo that just isn't quite right. After doing some reading and some research online, I've discovered that there's a problem that's going on with multiple Super Nintendo consoles, and even though that there are people that are talking about it and that there are people that are aware of it, I think it is an issue that needs to be addressed more when it comes to the Super Nintendo. So what exactly am I talking about? Well, I plan to tell you exactly all the details as to what exactly is going on and share with you guys some of my concerns and go deeper into this subject. But of course, I'm going to do just that right after the intro. Alright, so what exactly am I talking about when it comes to problems with the Super Nintendo and what's going on? Well, as mentioned from before, I've been collecting more Super Nintendo games lately, so that obviously means I'm dusting off the Super Nintendo and playing the Super Nintendo. Unfortunately, the one thing that I noticed right away when I was playing one of my games, I forget the exact title of what it was, but I was just testing it out. I believe it's NCAA basketball or something like that. But anyway, I was playing it and I couldn't help but notice that the floor was completely missing when it came to running across the basketball court in the game itself. Normally, I don't like sports games, but I wanted to test it out. And I was just noticing that just something wasn't quite right. So, of course, I immediately did was dusted off and cleaned off the teeth of the cartridge with some isopropyl alcohol a few times, got it cleaned off. Noticed that there were still some problems. And I thought, okay, that's interesting. And I decided to try another game, which was Super Mario Kart. Same thing was going on. Parts of the track were missing. I could see the sprites on screen, but there were just things that were supposed to be visible in the game, but aren't visible in the game. So after doing a little bit of some Googling and some research online, I was trying to figure out what on earth is going on. Why are these games not showing things that are supposed to be there, especially with more of the 3D type games where, they're not exactly 3D, but you know what I mean, where it's like they have that 3D-esque element to them. Well, I did come across a few things, and I'm not gonna lie, they are a bit concerning for me. So after reading some Reddit posts and looking through some Google search results, one thing that immediately popped up a lot when it came to this specific issue were PPU chips. And what exactly are PPU chips? They're essentially little chips inside of the Super Nintendo's motherboard, and they are what help display some of the graphics that come up. And unfortunately, after reading over time, they kind of begin to die out. And when they begin to die out, that's when, you see things like the missing, flooring of certain areas and just something doesn't look quite right when it comes to playing those games. So clearly you're probably thinking, oh, that's simple. Just order a new PPU chip, solder it back in, desolder the old one, switch it around, everything's good, right? And that's definitely a solution to the issue. However, here's the thing that really concerns me. So in order to get these parts have to come from already existing Super Nintendos. And these are consoles that are kind of beginning to die out, where people are reporting, hey, these chips are no longer working and I've had to get a replacement console, or buy chips from somebody who's already desoldered them, and then I gotta solder them back in, or go to my retro game store, get them fixed, whatever, right? The problem is that there aren't new ones being made, which means all the old ones that you're buying to replace the already dying ones, who's not to say those aren't going to work out, right? That's a big issue. Now, one thing that really kind of boggles my mind too is, take for example PlayStation 2. There's the power adapter inside, if I'm remembering the name correctly, where essentially it's having the same issue too, kind of, except that once it dies out, you can't turn on your PS2. The simple thing is, with that is, there's replacement parts available, and thankfully there are new replacement parts. They're third-party replacement parts, of course, but you can just swap them back in, and I literally had to do the exact same thing with my PS2 about 2 years ago now at this point. So, pretty simple, right? Everything's good with that. However, when it comes to replacement parts for consoles, usually when it comes to consoles that didn't sell well or are more rare, that's going to be more difficult to find replacement parts for, and especially third-party and new replacement parts. However, we're talking about the Super Nintendo here. The Super Nintendo is not a rare console. I mean, it's not as common as the PlayStation 2, but it's not going to be as rare as like the Amiga CD or whatever, right? So, and then the other thing that concerns me about it too is the fact that, hey, with these chips, would it make sense for a chip manufacturer to make these chips again? I mean, clearly they're not making them anymore. So if they're not making them anymore, who's going to be making the replacement parts for them, right? It's a pretty big issue that I think needs to be addressed when it comes to owning and collecting for the Super Nintendo. So I'm sure some of you are probably wondering, what am I going to be doing now with a Super Nintendo that's potentially dying, right? And, you know, all that. Well, I'm sure some people are probably going to be rushing to the comment section already saying, just go to emulation, just start using ROMs and all that, right? Well, for some people, they are probably more than happy to go down that route. However, for me personally, when it comes to how I like to play video games, I like to play things on the original hardware. I like to have the actual cartridge with the actual controller, with the actual console plugged in to a CRT TV and play a Super Nintendo game on a Super Nintendo, right? That's just how I like to do things. I'm a huge advocate of game preservation. So of course, a subject like this, you know, I think you already know where my stance is going to be. Now, granted, I've heard when it comes to the one-chip models of the Super Nintendo, those are going to have more durability and have less of the chip issues. So I have already went ahead and bought myself a one-chip Super Nintendo. However, I don't want this video to be a video of people just go rushing in to buy one-chip Super Nintendos and start freaking out about my Super Nintendo's going to be dead one day, I can no longer play these games, all that. The purpose of this video is to share to people, hey, this is a problem, people should be aware of it, and I think by having increased awareness, that can create the potential of a possible solution down in the future. What will that solution be like? I don't know. It could be, I mean, I'm not an expert when it comes to chips. I don't know much about chip manufacturing. Maybe there's a small chip company that would be willing to go ahead and work on some chips for a Super Nintendo if this gets enough attention. Not necessarily this video, but this problem. Maybe there's like a mod that somebody could make where it goes around and allows you to get some of those visuals again in the Super Nintendo. I mean, the truth of the matter is that all game consoles are dying in some form or another. But what's important is that, in my opinion, is that there are solutions out there to extend the life of these consoles. You know, that could be replacing the thermal paste in an old Xbox 360. That could be replacing like the power adapter, power unit, whatever the thing's called in a PlayStation 2, where it's no longer an authentic piece of, I don't want to say hardware, but not an authentic part, and that's extending the life. The truth of the matter is these consoles are dying, but I think, in my opinion, by having a big enough group of people where, you know, this is something that they care about, and obviously if the problem is talked about enough, I think that there can be a solution in store. So while it's definitely something that does concern me, I do think at the end of the day, as long as there's some form of attention that's being brought out there and there's enough people talking about it, I think that there is a possible solution that can be in store. Hey guys, thank you so much for checking out my video. Please be sure to check out these videos here, and here. After all, I post a lot of content when it comes to game collecting tips, and other video game related subjects. So be sure to keep an eye out every Monday and Friday where I upload consistently, and I'll be seeing you guys next time.